Welcome back to the Career Profiles podcast. I'm your host, Sean, joined by Johnston for part 2 of the Muhammad Ali career profile, 1964 to 2016. And we hope that you enjoyed our first episode. And if you haven't heard it, please, before you start listening, go and listen to part 1, because it sets the scene for the story that we're about to tell in part 2. Very much looking forward to the episode, Johnston. We've got so much to cover. Muhammad Ali's boxing career, of course, the most notable fights. We've got his exile from boxing, we've got after boxing, and we've got his end of his life and everything that came with the last 15-20 years of Muhammad Ali's life.
Yeah, it's a great story. The second part's brilliant. It's just the ending is always a bit sad because we're huge Muhammad Ali fans, and I'm sure you guys listening are too. So we'll hope we do him justice.
So we're going to follow on from where we left off in the last episode. And that was at the point where Muhammad Ali had become Muhammad Ali. It changed from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. So following his acceptance of the name Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time felt the need to justify this decision by using this analogy. And he said, if Hitler changed the names of people he was killing, and instead of killing them, made them slaves after the war, those people would have changed their slave names. That's all I was doing. He made a fair comparison that people change their names all the time and no one complains. Actors and actresses change their name. The Pope changes his name. Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson changed their names. If I changed my name from Cassius Clay to something like Smith or Jones because I wanted a name that the white people thought was more American, nobody would have complained. I was honoured that Elijah Muhammad gave me a truly beautiful name. Muhammad means one worthy of praise. Ali was the name of a great general. Now, it would take a very long time for Ali to gain general acceptance of his new name, let alone respect as a spokesman for his race and beliefs. And he explained again, I just spoke my mind, that's all. I said things black people thought but were afraid to say. I didn't hate. Not then. Not now. What I was doing was like a doctor giving someone a needle and hurting them a little to kill an infection. In the end, it helps. Many in the industry hated it. Harry Markson, president of Madison Square Garden, said what many believed. Responsible promoters will hesitate to touch this kid. Clay's antics have been deplorable. You don't use the heavyweight championship of the world to spout religious diatribe. We've made so much progress in eliminating colour barriers that it's a pity now we're facing such a problem. The heavyweight champion of the world preaching a hate religion. Late in 1963, Ali was forced to choose sides between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X due to a rift.
The rift between these two, well, Malcolm publicly said that President J.F. Kennedy's murder was a case of the chickens coming home to roost. And he added, being an old farm boy myself, chickens come home to roost never did make me sad. They always made me glad. Well, Elijah was outraged, so suspended Malcolm for 90 days to disassociate with Nation of Islam for his remarks. But Malcolm had become increasingly troubled by allegations of sexual misconduct and financial wrongdoing directed against his leader, and had begun to question the path the nation was taking. So it was clear that one way or another, members of the nation would have to take sides. Ali decided to align himself with Elijah, and on May the 14th, 1964, he left the United States for a month-long tour of Africa. Ali's entourage in Africa included Herbert Muhammad, one of Elijah Muhammad's 8 children, who would go on to have a massive influence over Muhammad Ali's career. The tour began in Ghana, where thousands of people cheered Ali's arrival and treated him like a national hero. While in Ghana, Ali crossed paths with Malcolm X, who was in the country at the time. He bumped into him in the hotel ambassador, and Ali snubbed him. Apparently, the champ told reporters, "Did you get a look at Malcolm? Dressed in a funny white robe and wearing a beard and walking with that cane that looked like a prophet's stick? Man, he's gone. He's gone so far out. He's out completely. Nobody listens to Malcolm anymore. After 2 weeks in Ghana, Ali travelled to Nigeria, where he received a polite but a less enthusiastic reception. He decided to cut that visit short and he moved on to Egypt, where they loved and embraced him. Ali visited the pyramids, was extensively photographed, riding a camel, and met with the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser. He returned to the United States to begin training for the Liston rematch, but he fell in love before he fought again.
Howard Bingham remembered the moment he met Sonji on July 3rd, 1964, and he said, "We had just come back from Africa, and Herbert introduced them so Ali could have some fun that night. At the time, Ali was very shy. I think Herbert paid Sonji for the first date, but I don't know for sure. And from that night on until the 14th of August, when they were married, Ali never let Sonji out of his sight." Muhammad Ali and Sonji were formally married in Gary, Indiana, on August 14th, 1964, 41 days after they met. Then Ali returned to serious training in Miami to prepare for the rematch scheduled for November 16th, 1964 in Lewiston, Maine. However, the fight had to be rescheduled after Ali suffered an incarcerated inguinal hernia. Liston was left devastated after training harder than ever, but it was rescheduled for May the 25th, 1965. But before that rematch, Malcolm X was murdered on February the 21st, 1965. Years later, Ali explained the rift and how he was informed. "When Malcolm broke with Elijah, I stayed with Elijah. I believed that Malcolm was wrong and Elijah was God's messenger. I was in Miami training when I heard Malcolm had been shot to death. Some brother came to my apartment and told me what had happened. It was a pity and a disgrace he died like that because what Malcolm saw was right, and after he left us, we went his way anyway. Colour didn't make a man a devil. It's the heart, soul and mind that counts." Now, we have been through the rematch with Liston on our Legendary Nights episode, but here of course is a brief description. Now, after a minute or so of casual action in the first round, Liston lunged at Ali with a left. Ali jerked his head out of danger, then pivoting forward, chopped a short right hand onto Liston's temple.
Liston dropped as if he had been shot. Now, while Ali stood over him, taunting him to get up, the challenger, though conscious, remained motionless. In the confusion, Liston was not counted out and finally scrambled to his feet after about 20 seconds. But the fight was judged over because of the time they had spent on the canvas. The cries of "fixed" filled the air and have never been laid to rest, ever. That, well, viewed at any speed, the so-called phantom punch does not look powerful enough to knock down a bruiser like Sonny Liston, but he was off balance. Some believe that the rotation generated by Ali's twist at the moment of striking might have magnified the force of the blow, and that he had hit that sweet spot. We've been through this many different times and many different opinions on this fight and added our own 2 pennies worth on the subject, so all we're going to say is check out all our other platforms on that legendary night and even Liston's career profile, Dark Side of Boxing. So on June 23rd, 1965, 29 days after defeating Sonny Liston, Ali filed a complaint in Dade County, Florida Circuit Court seeking an annulment to his marriage. Now, Ali explained what happened. He said, "When Sonji and I split, I just about went crazy, sitting in my room, smelling her perfume, looking at the walls. But it was something that had to happen. She wouldn't do what she was supposed to do. She wore lipstick, she went into bars, she dressed in clothes that were revealing and didn't look right. She made vows and then she broke them, and that brought on all sorts of quarrelling. One time I slapped her. It was wrong. It's the only time I did something like that, and after I slapped her, I felt sorrier than she did. It hurt me more than it hurt her. I was younger, 22 years old, and she was doing things against my religion. But it's no excuse, and a man should never hit a woman."
On January the 10th, 1966, a final judgment of divorce was issued and Ali was ordered to pay his wife $15,000 a year for 10 years, plus an additional $22,500 to her lawyers. Just before the divorce became final, he sent Sonji a note that read, "You traded heaven for hell, baby." Now in mid-1965, tensions between Ali and Bundini increased due to Bundini's relationship with white women and his alcohol intake, which further violated the code of the Nation of Islam. The final straw came when they learned Bundini had sold Ali's championship belt to a Harlem barber for $500. He was banished from the entourage immediately, a separation that lasted almost 5 years. Over the next 2 years, Ali established himself as an undeniably great heavyweight champion, defending his title often and always won. But outside the ring, he was running into trouble. He stopped the former heavyweight champion and the darling of America's boxing establishment, Floyd Patterson, in 12 rounds in his first defence, and then the trouble began. In February 1966, 12 weeks after his victory over Floyd Patterson, Ali became eligible for the military draft and should have prepared himself for service in Vietnam. It had all begun on April the 18th, 1960, when 18-year-old Cassius Clay registered for the military draft with Selective Service Local Board 47 in Louisville. On March the 9th, 1962, he was classified 1A, which meant available for the draft. Then on January 24th, 1964, 1 month before the first listing fight, Clay was ordered to the Armed Forces Induction Center in Florida for the military qualifying examination. The physical part of the exam was no problem, but the 50-minute mental fitness test was another matter. Ali said later, "When I looked at a lot of them questions, I just didn't know the answers. I didn't even know how to start about finding the answers."
Well, the result on the Army IQ score of 78, which put him in 16th percentile, was well below the passing grade of 30. 2 months later, he was retested to determine if the first score was the result of true failure or to establish if he was falsifying his results. 3 Army psychiatrists supervised the re-examination, and once again, Ali failed. On March 26, 1964, he was reclassified 1Y, meaning not qualified under current standards for service in the armed forces. Ali was embarrassed by the matter. In fact, he told reporters, "I said I was the greatest, not the smartest." For 2 years, the issue lay dormant, until early in 1966, when the mental ability rate required for the military was lowered from 30 to 15, leaving Muhammad Ali eligible for the draft. On February 14, 1966, his attorney appeared before a local board 47 in Louisville to present a letter requesting deferment from military service on numerous substantive and procedural grounds. 3 days later, the request was denied, and Ali was classified A1. Ali's response became one of the most memorable comments on that deeply divisive conflict. "Man, I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." And a little later, linking the war with the increasingly bitter civil rights struggle, "No Vietnamese can ever call me nigger." Due to his Viet Cong comment, the Ali and Ernie Terrell fight was actually abandoned because the Illinois Attorney General William Clark ruled that the bout violated state law. It was a load of bollocks. It was just a way of stopping the fight. They just didn't want Ali fighting in their state due to this current attitude, or his current attitude towards the war. It was then agreed that a fight in Toronto, Canada against George Chuvalo would be the best option. In a one-sided fight from start to finish, Ali won by unanimous decision on March 29, 1966.
In the aftermath of the Chuvalo fight, Ali was more controversial than ever, with a number of commentators likening him to Jack Johnson. Ali enjoyed the comparison, and he would say later, "Jack Johnson was the most influential person in my career. He did things in the ring defensively that I saw on film and tried to copy. He came along at a time when black people felt they had nothing to be proud of, and he made them proud." Then 6 weeks after the Chuvalo fight, Ali like Jack Johnson a half-century before him, was placed under surveillance by the United States government. Dozens of acquaintances, past and present, were interviewed. Police records were examined, and 7 traffic violations over a 5-year period in 4 states uncovered. The same investigation revealed that on September the 19th, 1964, Ali had purchased a .22 caliber Colt Derringer at a pawn shop in Miami, but that Abdul Rahman, formerly known as Captain Sam Saxon, had learned of the purchase and supposedly threw the weapon in the Atlantic Ocean. The whole thing was turning into a conspiracy to either force Ali into the military draft or punish him for standing for what he believed in. It was decided that 3 European bouts would be scheduled within the span of 3.5 months. Mickey Duff, fight manager and promoter, recalled them all, and he said, first, in May of 1966, Ali fought a rematch with Henry Cooper. That fight, without a doubt, was the biggest fight ever staged in England. A British heavyweight was fighting on home soil for the championship of the world, and because of the knockdown in their first fight, people thought Cooper had a chance. Ali cut him horribly over the left eye, one of the worst cuts I've ever seen, and the fight was stopped in the 6th round.
Well, Mickey Duff continued. He said, then in August, Ali came back to England and knocked out Brian London in 3 rounds. After that, he fought Carl Mildenberger in Frankfurt. Jarvis Astaire and I were co-promoters for the bout, and what I remember most about it was what happened afterwards. So Teddy Waltham had refereed the fight and done an excellent job. He stopped it in the 12th round, and the stoppage was perfect. It came at just the right time. The next morning we were all gathered to go back to London, and I saw Teddy. He was white as a sheep. We had paid him in cash right after the fight. We gave him £1,000, which in those days was about $2,400. He had had the money in his pocket, and somebody picked his pocket. He had lost it all. We got on the plane. Jarvis was sitting immediately behind me, so I turned my back to the front of the plane, leaned on my chair, and was telling Jarvis what had happened to Waltham, when suddenly I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Ali, and Ali asked, is that the guy who refereed my fight? I said, yeah. Ali shook his head and said, that's a shame. He worked so hard. Anyway, we got off the plane and I saw Waltham and he was looking quite happy. I said to him, you look like you found your money. And he told me, not exactly, but somebody must have told Ali because he just gave me £1,000. That was Ali. He had asked somebody how much £1,000 was in American money, went into his own pocket and he gave it to Waltham. Well, Ali returned to the States and he fought Cleveland Williams in, quite simply, one of the best performances you'll ever see by Muhammad Ali.
Howard Cosell explained, he said, the greatest Ali ever was as a fighter was in Houston against Cleveland Williams. That night, he was the most devastating fighter who had ever lived. He dominated from the opening bell, knocked Williams down 4 times and pummeled him until Williams was spitting blood. Now, at the turn of the year in 1967, Ali changed his legal residence to Houston, Texas, and then went on to fight Ernie Terrell on February the 6th at the Astrodome. Ali began the pre-fight publicity in poetic fashion, telling the reporters at a New York press conference, at the sound of the bell, Terrell will catch hell. Now, the bout was brutal. In the early rounds, Terrell suffered a fractured bone under his left eye and swelling of the left optic nerve. Later, he said that the injuries were caused by deliberate thumbing and aggravated further when Ali rubbed his eye along the upper strand of the ring ropes. Films of the fight are inconclusive regarding the cause of the damage to Terrell's eye. However, no one disputed that it was a savage, vicious fight. From the 8th round on, Terrell was virtually helpless. And from that point on, Ali taunted him mercilessly. Time and again he shouted, "What's my name?" and followed with a burst of blows to Terrell's eyes. "Uncle Tom, what's my name, Uncle Tom? What's my name?" Tex Maul wrote about this and said, by the 14th round, Terrell could no longer control his tormented body. Instead of reacting normally to a feint, he flinched instinctively with his whole being, and when he ventured to lead with his left, his recovery into protective crouch was exaggerated and somehow pitiful. It was a wonderful demonstration of boxing skill and a barbarous display of cruelty. Now, 2 weeks later, Ali's appeal to be reclassified as a Muslim minister was then denied 4-0 by the Federal Judicial District.
So on April 28th, 1967, Muhammad Ali refused to be inducted into the US Army and was immediately stripped of his heavyweight title. Just 1 hour after, before he'd even been charged of any crime, let alone convicted, the New York State Athletic Commission suspended his boxing license and withdrew recognition of him as champion. So soon all other states in the United States, they followed suit, and the title Ali had worked for throughout his life was gone. Now, we did go into great detail on Ali's exile from the sport in the Ali Frazier Legendary Night episode, so please go back and listen to that while we summarise this part of his life into a couple of paragraphs. Now, on May the 8th, 1967, 10 days after refusing induction, Ali was indicted by a federal grand jury in Houston. That same day, he was photographed, fingerprinted, and released on $5,000 bail on the condition that he cannot leave the continental United States. At a criminal case trial, a jury of 6 men and 6 women, all white, returned with a verdict of guilty of draft evasion. Then the judge imposed a maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment and a fine of $10,000. Following the sentence, the judge ordered that his passport be confiscated, and the court's action also terminated his ring career for 3 years. Now here's Ali on his exile. Some people thought I was a hero. Some people said that what I did was wrong, but everything I did was according to my conscience. I wasn't trying to be a leader. I just wanted to be free. And I made a stand all people, not just black people, should have thought about making, because it wasn't just black people being drafted.
Ali continued and said, the government had a system where the rich man's son went to college and the poor man's son went to war. Then after the rich man's son got out of college, he did other things to keep him out of the army until he was too old to be drafted. So what I did was for me, but it was the kind of decision everyone has to make. Freedom means being able to follow your religion, but it also means carrying the responsibility to choose between right and wrong. So when the time came for me to make up my mind about going into the army, I knew people were dying in Vietnam for nothing, and I should live by what I thought was right. I wanted America to be America, and now the whole world knows that. So far as my own beliefs are concerned, I did what was right for me. Now Ali spent much of his time with appearances at colleges, black and white, and even looked at the whole thing with a positive spin on it by saying, in a way, it's worth being banned from boxing. Otherwise, I would not have met some of the most attractive, alert, and intelligent groups I have ever been associated with. Although he avoided prison for his draft evasion, he was sentenced to 10 days in prison at Dade County, Florida, for driving without a valid license. At the age of 25, he got married for a second time on August 17, 1967, to Belinda Boyd. After their marriage, she changed her name to Khalila Ali in accordance with the Muslim traditions. They had 4 children together before they eventually divorced in 1977.
And Ali said for the first 3 years of our marriage, there were no trips across the world to fight, no build-ups for fights, no training for fights. It was the worst time of my career, but the best for my family. Elijah Muhammad then suspended Muhammad Ali from the Nation of Islam in early 1969 because he said he would go back to boxing if the money was right. And apparently that comment angered Elijah Muhammad. So he sent a messenger to tell Ali that he was taking his name back and suspending him from the faith, indicating that he was basically begging for the white man's money. Elijah Muhammad made his feelings public by having his reasons printed in the Nation of Islam's newspaper. One night, while in exile, Muhammad Ali called Drew Bundini Brown to ask about the disappearance of his World Championship belt. And he got the answer. And this is what we're going to explain. So Bundini answers the phone. He says, "Hello, champ. You want to know what I did with your belt? Well, champ, I kept it safe and sound since the night Malcolm X was murdered. You remember the night your apartment burned in Chicago? 4 hours after Malcolm X was murdered. And me going up to the burning building and bringing out your World Heavyweight Championship belt and taking it back to New York for safekeeping. Well, to make a long story short, champ, I pawned it." "What?" Please. I thought you'd understand, champ. I got broke, please. My car note was due. My rent was backed up 4 months. My woman had left me. I'd already pawned every piece of jewelry I owned. So I looked at your big old gold belt, the most valuable thing I had seen in the house, and so I went to the best pawnbroker in New York. And by experience, I expect them to give me less than what I ask. So I ask for more than I expect."
Bundini continued and said, "I told the pawnbroker, give me $1,500 on this. I told him the belt belonged to you, champ Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, the real, true World Heavyweight Champion. They taken your title, but here's the belt. I told him 30 other world champions owned it before you became the greatest." All the clerks and customers in the shop gathered around and looked. Everybody in the pawn shop was raving over it. Only one of its kind. When he got the glass and peeped at it, he threw it back at me. "I can't give you a dime," he said. And I asked, "What do you mean, you can't give me a dime? On the World Heavyweight Championship belt? You can't give me no money." And he said, "This thing ain't worth a nickel." And I said, "You gotta be wrong." And he replied, "Just keep on talking if you want to. This ain't nothing but gold-coloured metal with some printing of the names of some old fighters and the words World Heavyweight Championship belt. All it's got is sentimental value. Champ, it wasn't worth more than the headlines on the newspaper they gave you the next morning with your picture in it. In fact, the man didn't even give me a dime, so the newspaper's worth more than the belt. Champ, I was not only disappointed that I didn't have Subway fare back home, I was disappointed for the name of boxing. Boxing ain't for glory, it's for money. All the millions and millions of big-time promoters from Tex Rickard and Mike Jacobs to Jim Norris, places from Madison Square Garden to Chicago Stadium, made off heavyweights, from Dempsey to Joe Louis, Walcott to Marciano. They didn't think enough of the symbol them heavyweights were knocking their brains out for to make it worth a dime. I thought about how you dropped the Olympic medal in Ohio. I should have dropped the belt in the Hudson."
Well, after that conversation, Ali and Bundini, when they made up, I bet he made Ali laugh as well. And the man who created the phrase "float like a butterfly and sting like a bee" was back in his life and in his corner. Well, Ali went to have a computer fight at this time as well, in exile, with Rocky Marciano, and successfully have his conviction finally overturned after 3 years in exile. But in the meantime, he was banned from fighting in the US and travelling abroad. Ali had his license reinstated when it was ruled that religious beliefs could be grounds for conscientious objection. Can you believe that? All that time, it took them that long. In August that year, it was announced that Ali could box in Atlanta, Georgia, which had a black senator at the time. Now, his 3 years out had cost him dearly, as he had to work his way into contention once again. And now there was a new king of the ring to conquer in that form of Smoking Joe Frazier. So Ali's first fight back on that comeback trail was on October the 26th, 1970. It was against Jerry Quarry, a strong but limited fighter who had gone 7 rounds with Frazier. Now, in his first fight, Ali let himself be pinned on the ropes, taking body shots, something that would become a characteristic feature for the second phase of his career. By the third round, though, Ali had won when he opened the cut over Quarry's left eye and the fight was stopped. To the dismay of the crowd as well. They'd be disappointed with that. Ali won his next fight against a tough Argentinian called Oscar Bonavena. And again, please check out our darker side of boxing on the episode of Oscar Bonavena if you haven't already. We do go into a lot of detail on the build-up and the fight. But that victory against Oscar Bonavena landed him a shot at the world champion Joe Frazier on March the 8th, 1971. And it was his attempt to reclaim the world heavyweight title he had lost, or not lost, in the ring. Once again, for more detail on the build-up and the fight itself, please go back and listen to our Legendary Nights episode. Ali learned just how formidable the reigning world champion was, though, in that memorable 15-round fight, also known as the fight of the century.
And as we said, please, if you haven't already heard this story before, please listen to that particular tale, the tale of Frazier and Ali. We do go into a lot more of a breakdown in that, which is why we've not done it for this episode. And if you're wondering why we've not done it with certain stories, it's because them stories have been told in various episodes. Now, after a few rounds in the Madison Square Garden ring, Ali had lured Frazier to attack him on the ropes. Frazier unleashed a heavy blows to the body, while Ali retaliated with blows to Frazier's head. Ali looked to have edged about by the 11th round, but then Frazier rocked Ali with a left hook to the jaw, which put him on the defensive. And in the 15th round, Ali was caught with a long left hook to the head, and he went down for a 3 count. The verdict was unanimous, with Frazier emerging as the worthy winner, and still the world heavyweight champion. But the slugfest had taken its toll on both fighters, Ali in particular. His jaw was horribly swollen due to hemorrhage, and his hip joints were so damaged from Frazier's blows he could barely walk. Ali was far from finished though, and over the next 2 years he beat an assortment of top contenders from the summer of 1971 to the winter of 1972, which included his old pal and sparring partner Jimmy Ellis. He beat Buster Mathis, Bob Foster, and rematches with George Chuvalo, Jerry Quarry, and Floyd Patterson. Now, in the autumn of 1972, Ali opened his own training facility in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania. The focal point of the camp was a 50 by 60 foot gym built at a cost of $42,000. Other structures included a dining hall, a barn, a 2-story bungalow, and cabins for sparring partners, guests, and friends. Huge boulders lay scattered around the land with the names of former champions painted on. Ali would train at Deer Lake for the remainder of his career, and it was here where he prepared for a fight against Joe Bugner. On Valentine's Day 1973, Ali and Bugner fought in Las Vegas, with Ali winning over 12 slow rounds. The most notable aspect of the fight was a flowing, decorated robe bearing the legend People's Champion, which Ali wore to the ring.
Yes, some observed the attire that he was wearing and felt that it looked a bit tacky, but Ali had no choice to wear it. He had to wear it. The robe was a gift from one of his favourite singers, Elvis Presley, as well, and a huge name, who Ali had literally admired intensely since the age of 14, apparently. So the victory over Bugner was Ali's 10th in a row, and a title fight within the next year seemed likely. But first, he had to overcome a guy called Ken Norton on May 31st, 1973 in California. And Ali explained what happened in the fight. He said, "I think back to the second round when Norton got in, through my guard, and crashed a left right up against my jaw. I know exactly when the blow came. I felt a snap and a sudden gush of blood in my throat. When I come back to my corner, I asked Bandini and Angelo, how can you tell when your jaw is broke? When you open it like this, and Bandini demonstrates, and it clacks, it's broke. I opened it and I heard the clack. A sharp pain goes around my face. I spit the blood trickling down my throat into the bucket and wash my mouth, but more comes gushing in. If it's broke, Bandini says, we've got to stop the fight. But he knows I won't stop. There are 13 more rounds to go and I can win. I glance down ringside. I see Joe Frazier and Archie Moore looking up puzzled. They're here to coach Norton. I'd like to see them leave disappointed. Before the bell rings, Bandini whispers in my ear, Shorty, as we've mentioned in the first part, who he calls God, Shorty is in the living room, watching. Shorty is sitting down, crossing his legs and watching you. Just remember that. And during the whole time, I'm struggling to take Norton out before another blow crashes into my jaw. Bandini is screaming, Shorty is watching you, in the living room, on TV in the living room, he's watching you. I go through round after round, seeing openings, but I know I can't rumble with Norton in the corners anymore.
I can't afford to exchange blows. Even when I throw a punch and it lands, the pain goes through my hand as though I've got arthritis. Afterwards, people want to know why I didn't stop. Didn't I know I could have got my face torn off? Even now I can't explain it. Maybe I didn't think it was really broken that bad. Maybe because I didn't believe Norton could beat me, even with a broken jaw. Maybe because I never backed off from a fight. Then in the ring, under the heat and excitement, my jaw didn't feel as bad as it does sitting here, cold in the dressing room. Every throb is like a toothache. The decision is announced as a Ken Norton win by split decision, and straight after the decision, Ali remembered what happened moments later and said, policemen leapt into the ring, but people break past them, pouring in under the ropes. Joe Fraser is hugging Norton, who is his stablemate and sparring partner. A radio commentator is yelling for me to come over, say something to explain it. But Angelo and Bandini are already moving me down the steps. Ali remembers tasting blood draining into my throat, and the pain in my face and shoulders is growing. I remember pausing and looking over to where I know Belinda is sitting. I want to wave at her, give her some sign that I'm alright, but the police and crowd are shoving against each other, and I'm pushed towards the dressing room. My head feels as if it would drop off. The pain in the left side of my jaw is almost more than I can stand. The defeat to Norton was a hard one to take, especially after Belinda became so traumatised from the consistent heckles from the crowd that when the verdict was read out, that she lost it.
She really did as well. Her friend Susie Gomez actually told Ali in the dressing room after the fight that she started fighting her way through the crowd. She hit a policeman and she was screaming all the time, screaming, Muhammad Ali is dead, they killed him. Well, Belinda was actually a black belt in karate and was literally kicking ass until she was eventually overpowered by security. She was strapped down on a dressing room table and sedated by Dr. Pacheco. Ali went to see her, and this is what he explained. Again, he said Belinda was strapped down on a dressing table, and she's clawing, straining, screaming, rolling her head from side to side. Youngblood, who's aka Water Youngblood, his assistant trainer, and 4 other men are holding her down. While I stand there, she struggles and twists so hard the straps fly open, and the men scramble to keep her down and get the straps fastened again. He tried to calm her down and get through to her that he was alive, he wasn't dead, but he was eventually forced to go to hospital so he could have an x-ray on his jaw. As expected, his jaw was broken, and he had immediate surgery where his jaw was eventually wide shut, and the doctor told him, you won't be able to talk for a while, only through your teeth. And Ali, he mustered up enough strength to open his mouth and say, it's the worst punishment of all. Now I really got to pay Norton back. So Bandini visits him one morning and he tells Ali, Howard Cosell is predicting you're finished. He's saying that 3.5 years exile took too much out of you. The sucker is taking you cheap. Only yesterday he was saying how great you were. Don't blame Cosell, I strain. I say through my teeth, blame me. Only a fool stays with a sinking ship.
Ken Norton and Eddie Futch went to visit Ali in hospital, and during friendly conversation, they tell him that they have been offered $1 million to fight George Foreman, the new heavyweight champion. And even though he feels like they are snatching away his dream of a title shot, he gives Norton some advice. You're a good fighter. You throw some heavy bombs. If you win the title, give everybody a shot. Don't duck. Don't hide from nobody. Ali even gives Norton his heavy bag as a gift, a bag he had used at his camp years earlier. Then right before they leave, Futch asks for a picture of Ali and Norton together, telling Ali, just for my family album, just for my children. Bundini refuses, but Ali has no objection, and Norton poses by the head of the bed. However, it's not so innocent, Ali said. Then I discover that the pictures were never meant for the Futch family album. By chance, Futch has brought along a professional photographer with him. Norton and his manager have set it up so the photographs will appear in publications all over the world. The conqueror and the defeated. The man who broke the jaw of Muhammad Ali standing next to his victim. Ali would get his own back the very next day by stopping the Norton-Foreman fight. Dick Sadler and his lawyer Harry Barnett visit him the next day. He had first met Sadler when he was 17 after the Louisville sponsoring group sent him up to Archie Moore's camp in San Diego. Sadler helps train young Cassius at the time, but now he's the manager of Foreman. He tells Ali to rest, and he would have the Foreman fight for $5 million. The loss to Norton didn't matter. He was still the biggest draw in boxing and would make the most money. But Ali wasn't interested in money. He wanted revenge.
He did, and he said to Sadler that he made him promise that he would allow him to fight Norton next in the rematch, and the winner would get Foreman. Now, after some back and forth, Sadler agreed and gave Ali some sound advice. He said, "When you get out of here, go home and get some rest. That's the best medicine. A good long rest, away from the newspapers, from the gyms, away from all ring business. Go somewhere you can think. Go back home to Louisville." Now, while Ali was in hospital, one of his assistants, Eugene Kilroy, and his manager, Herbert Mohammed, who had known Belinda for many years, were visiting her every day, but now Ali needed to see her. So Kilroy drove him to see his wife, who was still struggling mentally, quite bad, still believing that Ali was dead. He tried his best to get through to her, but it was going to take a bit of time. In the end, Ali returned to hospital, was handed a sack of letters, some wishing him well and others not so much. He remembered one that read, "The butterfly lost its wings. The bee has lost its sting. You are through, you loud-mouthed braggart. Your mouth has been shut up for all times. It's a great day for America. You're finished." Well, Ali, he loved the first bit. The butterfly has lost its wings and the bee has lost its sting. When he was able to train again, getting out from hospital, go home, he decided he's going to tape that quote, that letter, to the wall of his gym. He wanted to see it every day he worked out. And he said, "So I remember that the butterfly has got to get back its wings and the bee has got to get back its sting." Of all the messages that came into me while I was in Claremont Hospital, this is the one I like the best. It's funny, but those who hate me most sometimes inspire me the most, as long as I know they're out there.
It took a few weeks, but Belinda managed to recover and become well enough to travel home with her husband in the spring of 1973. Ali recalled, "I wanted to go home, to rest, to see Bird and my father and old friends, to see where I am, to remember who I am, where I came from and where I want to go. I was born, bred and spent the first 21 years of my life there. I have to know if it's really home, the place you can go when you're whipped." While Belinda was working through her mental health, which she said was affected by watching her husband taking and dishing out punishment in the ring, Ali also had an epiphany, and he recalled, "When you win so long, so much, you forget. You think your name will win. You forget the sacrifices, the work that goes into winning. Now I'm down, way down. They say I'm finished. They're celebrating. But I'll come back. I can win my title back." The comeback began with that rematch against Norton, and Ali said, "I took a nobody and created a monster. I put him on the dating game. I gave him glory. Now I have to punish him bad." In the rematch, as with their first fight, Ali and Norton were even, entering the 12th and final round. This time though, Ali captured the last 3 minutes on the judges' scorecards and won a close but unanimous decision. 6 weeks later, on October the 20th, 1973, he fought again getting a decision over Rudy Lubis in Jakarta, Indonesia. Then came his most important fight for 3 years, the second bout against Joe Frazier on January the 28th, 1974. Ali Frazier 2, like Ali Frazier 1, was fought in Madison Square Garden. Each fighter was guaranteed $850,000 against 32.5% of the net income from the fight.
Well, given those percentages, they were paid roughly the same amount as for the first encounter. But more important, there was the matter of pride. Ali wanted desperately to avenge his earlier loss, and Frazier flat out didn't like Ali. In the weeks leading up to the second fight, Ali and Frazier, they traded insults repeatedly. Frazier said, "Clay and I, we want each other bad." I still call him Clay. His mother named him Clay. Ali in turn took pleasure in branding Frazier ignorant, a label that Frazier hated more than any other apparently. Ignorant, I think he calls him worse than that. When on Wednesday, January the 23rd, 1974, 5 days before their fight, the bitterness between the two came to boil. Now here's Howard Cosell on their famous TV fight. That Saturday, ABC Sports was going to broadcast a tape of Ali Frazier 1. It was the first time the fight had been shown on home television, and we arranged for Ali and Joe to be in the studio to comment round by round. Joe almost didn't come. He and Eddie Frutch, who had become Joe's manager after the untimely death of young Darren, felt Ali would use the opportunity to make personal, abusive comments before a national audience. And I gave my word that I would not allow that to happen. No way. I told Joe that I would insist upon both men limiting their remarks to the fight, and that I would cut Ali off at the first sign of personal diatribe. And of course, my word was good enough for Joe. When they arrived at the studio, the producer set us out on the stage, with Joe in the middle, flanked by Ali and myself on either side. And everything went smoothly until Joe, not Ali, Joe, made a remark about Ali having to go to hospital after the fight.
Cosell continued and said, up until that time, Ali had been relatively controlled. Occasionally, he'd gone off on a tangent, but whenever he did, I brought him back to the business at hand. It was after Joe's comment about the hospital that the situation exploded. As soon as the hospital comment left Frazier's lips, Ali responded, "Why'd you say that about the hospital, Joe? Why'd you bring up the hospital? I wasn't going to talk about the hospital. Everybody knows I went to the hospital for 10 minutes. You were in the hospital for 3 weeks. You're ignorant, Joe." Ignorant was the catalyst. Frazier then stood up, leaned over Ali and demanded, "Why'd you call me ignorant?" At that point, Ali's brother Rahman, who was in the studio, jumped onto the stage and moved towards Frazier, who snapped, "You want to get in this too?" Then Ali rose from his chair and grabbed Frazier in the manner of a wrestler, applying a bear hug. Ali was playing, but Frazier wasn't. Now the TV fight was real, and if it hadn't have been interrupted, then you would have probably favoured Frazier in a street fight. But their second meeting turned out to be another excellent fight that actually gets overshadowed by their brilliant first and third fights, but it was the most one-sided, which went in Ali's favour. He eventually outpointed Frazier over 12 rounds, much to the annoyance of Team Frazier, who argued of persistent holding that the referee failed to stop. To be fair, they had a point, but in the end it was irrelevant, because now their third meeting was on the horizon, and that would go on to be one of the greatest fights in the history of boxing. But before that, Ali was hoping to face the awesome George Foreman. We have been through the build-up to the Foreman fight and the aftermath in depth on the tale of Foreman versus Ali, so please, if you haven't heard that, or if you have heard it, you'll have heard all the stories surrounding the Rumble in the Jungle.
Yeah, we are. I mean, that is a great legendary night. So again, do go back and listen, but we will be doing a little bit more than just a few paragraphs. So what we will do is fill you in some different stories, basically, that we didn't share with you in that Legendary Night episode. And it starts with the moment that Muhammad Ali met Don King at Deer Lake. So Ali explained what happened. He said, after my victory over Joe Frazier, I feel the kind of peace that comes when a fighter has finally evened up an old score. I've wiped out the bad taste of both the Norton and Frazier defeats. And for the first time in my life, I'm thinking about retirement, about a different kind of life with my family and children, away from the camps, the gyms, the rings, and the press conferences. That being said, Ali wanted a crack at the World Heavyweight title. And Herbert had actually sent one of his business associates, a guy called C.B. Atkins, out to Oakland, California to persuade Foreman to accept what would have been the highest, or his highest purse, and the highest purse in boxing history, of $4,500,000. But apparently George Foreman refused to sign with any promoter at that time. Now, among several promoters offering millions for the super fight was the Madison Square Garden, Jerry Pacheco, and United Artists. They were obviously the next one in line, but there was a newcomer who comes in with the best offer. And there's no one better to explain how this come about than obviously Muhammad Ali. And it's what he recalled. So he says, I'm sitting on a pile of logs outside my mountainside gym in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania, and looking down at the cars rolling by on Highway 62, when I see a long black Cadillac turn into the middle of the road that winds up the mountain to my camp. Kilroy, my camp aide, is looking through the binoculars. It's Don King, he says. In a few minutes, the Cadillac swings open, and out steps two young fighters and King, dressed like he's on his way to an opera, with a brown tuxedo, ruffled shirt and bow tie. King is taller than I am, with a full, round stomach and foot-high hair that stands straight up on his head. He's a showman, promoter, and he talks like he's reading from a book.
This wasn't the first time that Ali had actually met Don King. He'd actually known him since his days as a gambler in Cleveland, but hadn't seen him since he fought a 10-round exhibition in 1972 for a benefit boxing show. Now King was promoting the World Heavyweight title fight between George Foreman and Ken Norton in Venezuela. And Ali recalls, he leads his two fighters, Jeff Candy Slim Merritt and Ernie Shavers, to the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley below and the Blue Ridge Mountains across the way. My God, he says, such a glorious sight for a fighter to rest and heal, with the sweet balm of nature, those cruel blows which fate and Frazier deal out. After such a great victory in Madison Square, a great champion deserves something to delight the eyes and rest the soul. Majestic mountains, evergreen trees, and such spacious to exalt your triumph. Now, after accepting some food from Ali's cook, Sister Lana, King backs away from the cliff and says, Ali, now I need your attention for a while. He tells him that he listened to the fight of the century on his prison radio, but before allowing him to continue, Ali asks, You want to bring Candy and Ernie here to train with me? King replies, That's only part of what I want. The other part is more important. With your manager as my guide, I come to bring you a shot at what Herbert knows has been unjustly denied you for 2 long years, a fight for the World Heavyweight Championship. I can sign George. Blood says in disbelief, nobody can deliver George. And Ali explains the rest and says, King wants our conversation to be private, but at the mention of George Foreman, the camp comes alive, everybody crowding around. I hide the feeling of hope that starts upon me. Am I finally to have a title fight before I retire?
Well, King goes on and he says that George has got to come in. The biggest cash ever paid in the history of performance. Julius Caesar never paid his gladiators half as much. Jesse James never performed for that much. No actor, dancer or singer in the history of planet Earth ever got that much for a single performance. Blood, as in Young Blood, says, It's a trick. Nobody in his right mind would pay $10 million for a fight. And King replies, if you don't believe me, you can check it out with Herbert. He masterminded the whole play. Herbert had already, this is Ali by the way, Herbert had already called me from Chicago and told me he had a $10 million certified check from Jerry Pacheco for the Foreman fight, and that Madison Square Garden was almost as good, but no one had signed George yet. Now, King says, I've got the proposal George has got to take. And then he goes off. He says, now I must tell you what Brutus said to Cassius of Rome. And here's what King says to the group and Ali. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads onto fortunes. Omitted by the voyage of their life is bound in shadows and in miseries. Why you say that? Young blood asked. When I deliver Foreman, Ali must take full advantage of it, for it may be his last chance at a title fight. No other promoter can do it. Ali recalls what happened next. He says, on February the 10th, I fly into Chicago, where Herbert has planned to set up a conference call from his house to George. Finally, it comes through, and George is on the phone. It's the first time I've ever sat with Herbert while we're manoeuvring for a fight, and it feels strange. George says he's ready to take you on, Herbert whispers. Challenge him. I'll grab the phone. George, you think you got the nerve to get in the ring with me? Anytime, anywhere for the money, he snaps back.
They're talking about $10 million. Let's make it history, I say. Don King's coming out there with a contract. I've looked over it, and it's all right. Let's get it on, if you're not scared. George replies, scared of you? I only pray that I don't kill you, he growls. I put the phone down and tell Herbert. He sounds shaky. Well, weeks pass before King finally arrived back at Ali's camp to report back on how he managed to get George to sign the contract. He admitted to Ali that he tracked Foreman down at a parking lot. He told others it was in a toilet. But this is Don King. His stories always change through the years. He admits to Ali, I said, George, Ali is on his last legs right now. It would be better for you to knock him off and get credit than to watch somebody else do it. And someone asks, you want George to win? And Ali recalls, King raises his eyes to heaven. May the best man win. I confess, when I'm in Ali's camp, I want Ali to win. When I go over to George's camp, I want him to win. I'm trying to promote both fighters. How can I do otherwise? Now, King explained that he used all sorts of tactics to persuade a stubborn Foreman, including using his love for Liston. And he said, George, you're the young Liston. You can show the world what Liston would have done to Ali in his prime. You can rewrite history. But the real deciding pitch came when King told Foreman, until you beat Muhammad Ali, the world will never recognise you as the champion. As long as he's alive and fighting, you don't show the world who's the best. They'll look at Ali as the master. George signed 3 blank pages. Then the contract was written up, which Herbert approved before Ali signed.
There was another moment that almost derailed the fight when, according to author David Wolf, Don King actually hid in the bedroom of Herbert Muhammad's Manhattan apartment while Bob Arum and Teddy Brenner were actually trying to make Ali change his mind and instead fight Jerry Quarry at Madison Square Garden. And we did speak of this on our Darker Side of Boxing episode on Don King, so please go and check that out. It's some funny story, that. But here's Ali's version. So he says, Arum said, look, the Foreman fight will never come off. The investors are backing out already. Go ahead and take the Quarry fight. It's a sure thing. And Brenner insisted, why go with Don King? Don't you know King's a gangster, a killer? You don't want this gangster in the business. I picked up the pen to sign, but Bundini, who's been with me all morning, he broke into tears. Champ, don't do it. Think of all the people in Africa you'll be letting down. As far as King being a gangster, it was gangsters that built Madison Square Garden. So it was Herbert who decided the issue by abruptly letting me know that he was opposed to my signing, so he didn't sign it. And regardless of what King did, Teddy Brigner is correct when he said actually King didn't promote the fight, although he did his best to make it seem that way. Apparently Video Techniques, which we did go into in Don King's episode as well, put it together with front money from a British corporation and the rest of the government of Zaire. King was helpful in lining up the fighters, but the deal could have been made without him. But they were jealous. I mean, let's be honest, King did do the business, didn't he? He had the talk and the lingo. So it was a collective effort. And so the Rumble in the Jungle was signed and sealed, and it would also be the fight that cemented Muhammad Ali's reputation and his legacy. And Thomas Hauser, we're going to use a bit from his book, and he explained the significance of the fight in great detail. It's a great way of putting this. So in 1974, the spirit of the 60s was very much alive. Indeed, within the span of 12 weeks, two events seemed to vindicate the decade. First, Richard Nixon resigned his presidency, and then Muhammad Ali regained his crown.
Thomas Hauser continued and said, "There have been other sporting events that captured the imagination of the world, but no athletic contest in history inspired as much global joy as the battle between Ali and George Foreman, which took place in the pre-dawn hours of October 30th, 1974 in Kinshasa, Zaire. Like Sonny Liston, Foreman was considered unbeatable. His professional record was 40 wins and no losses, with 37 knockouts. His 8 most recent bouts had ended in the first or second round, and among his victims in those fights were Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, the two men who had beaten Ali. Many, understandably, couldn't see anything other than a George Foreman knockout. Dave Anderson of the New York Times echoed most people's feelings in his short but accurate description when he wrote, "George Foreman might be the heaviest puncher in the history of the heavyweight division. For a few rounds, Ali might be able to escape Foreman's sledgehammer strength, but not for 15 rounds. Sooner or later, the champion will land one of those sledgehammer punches, and for the first time in his career, Muhammad Ali will be counted out. That could happen in the first round." The war of words between Ali and Howard Cosell was never more evident than in the build-up to this particular fight. Cosell said this, "Ali was not the same man he used to be 10 years ago." And Ali replied, "You're always talking about Ali, you're not the same man you were 10 years ago. Well, I asked your wife and she told me that you're not the same man you was 2 years ago." Now the fight was originally scheduled for September the 25th, 1974. The 24th in the United States due to the difference in time zones. However, 8 days prior, Foreman was cut above his right eye by an accidental elbow while sparring with Bill McMurray.
Foreman actually required 11 stitches, and the date of the fight pushed back 5 weeks to October the 30th. During the long delay, Ali was happy to show his face in public and be with the people, while George locked himself away and stayed in seclusion. Ali was not bothered by the delay. In fact, he enjoyed himself. But there was one person who could grind him up the wrong way, and that was Leon Gast, who was in Kinshasa as a director of a 100-man film crew. And this is what he said about the one person that was irritating more than anyone else. Well, he said, "Nothing seemed to bother Ali except maybe Don King. Once or twice, you could see King was getting on Ali's nerves. And that was hard to do because nothing seemed to bother Ali." One incident in particular that sticks in my mind happened at a press conference. Ali and King were seated on the stage with Angelo in between. Bandini had a funny line he wanted to pass to Ali, so he whispered it to King. Then King leaned over Dundee to tell Ali whatever it was Bandini said. And Angelo asked, "What did he say?" And King told him, "I ain't talking to you." But Ali got furious. He leaned forward, put his finger in King's face and said, "Don't you talk to Angelo like that. Don't you ever talk to him like that again." Dundee made light of it. He put his hands in the air and said, "Come on, fellas." And they went on with the press conference. But I thought it was admirable the way Ali stuck up for Dundee. As soon as he saw King was trying to belittle Angelo, he got right in on King. Well, during the delay, Ali famously dropped one of his famous poems. You can't not put it in. And his famous poem was, I done wrestle with an alligator, I done tussle with a whale. Only last week I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalised a brick. I'm so mean I make medicine sick.
When the fight finally arrived, Ali's display matched tactical brilliance with breathtaking courage, and there is no one better to break this fight down than the man himself, Mr. Muhammad Ali. And he said, I didn't really plan what happened that night, but when a fighter gets in the ring, he has to adjust according to the conditions he faces. Against George, the ring was slow. Dancing all night, my legs would have got tired, and George was following me too close, cutting off the ring. In the first round, I used more energy staying away from him than he used chasing me. I was more tired than I should have been with 14 rounds to go. I knew I couldn't keep dancing, because by the middle of the fight, I'd be really tired, and George would get me. So between rounds, I decided to do what I did in training when I got tired. It was something Archie Moore used to do. Archie was a smart fighter. He fought until he was as old as I am now. And he did it by conserving energy. He let younger men take their shots and blocked everything in scientific fashion. And then, when they got tired, Archie would attack. Not everyone can do that. It takes a lot of skill. But I figured I'd be able to handle George off the ropes early in the fight when I was fresh. And if he hit too hard, I'd just start dancing again. So starting in the second round, I gave George what he thought he wanted. And he hit hard. A couple of times, he shook me bad, especially with the right hand. But I blocked and dodged most of what he threw, and each round, his punches got slower and hurt less when they landed. Then I started talking to him. Hit harder. Show me something, George. That don't hurt. I thought you were supposed to be bad.
And George was trapped. I was on the ropes, but he was trapped, because attacking was all he knew how to do. By round 6, I knew he was tired. His punches weren't as hard as before. And because of the way George fought, one punch at a time with his head not moving, it was getting easier to hit him with counter punches. The punch I knocked him out with, if I'd have knocked him down in the first round, he would have got up. But by the time I got him, he was so exhausted that to pull himself up, it was just too much. Shortly after the fight ended, a torrential thunderstorm began, flooding the stadium and knocking out satellite communication. Hundreds of fans remained in the stands chanting, Ali Boumbaye, Ali kill him. That battle cry they'd chanted during the whole night of the fight. 10 years after he'd beaten Sonny Liston, 7 years after he'd been stripped from his world heavyweight title, Muhammad Ali had at long last reclaimed the heavyweight championship of the world, becoming the second man in history to ever recapture a world heavyweight title, and for the second time in his career, Ali had proved his doubters wrong. That night in Zaire, Ali proved that he was the greatest, and he was still only in his early 30s, and would continue taking on heavyweights for another 7 years. For mere mortals, the Rumble in the Jungle would have been the crowning glory in an incredible career. For the 33-year-old Muhammad Ali, it was just another high in a journey of seemingly ever greater peaks. As the undisputed greatest, he stood at the summit of heavyweight boxing, the measure of all foes both new and old. Then in March 1975, he chose to fight the real-life Rocky Balboa, Chuck Wepner, in Cleveland, Ohio. We have gone through the build-up of this fight in particular in Wepner's Darker Side of Boxing episode, so please go back and check out if you want more information on that.
But in short, Ali went down in the 9th round, which prompted the Bayonne bleeder to walk back to his corner and shout over to his manager, Al Braverman, Al, start the car. We're going to the bank. We're millionaires. Unfortunately, Ali was up in a couple of seconds, and he was pissed off. In the end, Wepner was stopped in the 15th round with 19 seconds left on the clock. It was this fight, watched by struggling actor Sylvester Stallone, that inspired the film Rocky and its 4 sequels. 1 month earlier, On February the 25th, 1975, Elijah Muhammad passed away, and Ali recalled, "I was at Deer Lake training when I heard the news, and it made me sad. Elijah Muhammad dedicated his life to helping black people. Not everything he said was right, but everyone in the Nation of Islam loved him because he carried what was best for us in his heart. His life was dedicated to lifting people up, and it was his teaching that started me thinking." Now, within 2 months of the Wepner fight, Ali was in action again, knocking out Ron Lyle in the 11th round in Las Vegas, Nevada. A month and a half later, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, he faced Joe Buckner, taking the decision over 15 rounds. But these were mere sideshows, mere warm-ups for the main event some 3 months later. It was then that fight fans got what they wanted. Another clash between Ali and the relentless, smoking Joe Frazier. Eddie Futch said, "I remember signing the contract. Ali wound up getting $6 million and Joe received half that amount. But one thing about the contract that sticks in my mind is Joe required accommodations for 17 people and Ali needed rooms for 50. That's how big his entourage had grown." And later, the president of the Hilton Hotel in Manila told me that even though Ali had 50 rooms, when he got there, he needed 2 more.
But when Ali actually arrived in Manila, there was one member of his entourage that played a very special role, and her name was Veronica Porsche, who for almost a year had been Ali's mistress and would eventually go on to become his wife. So by September 1975, their relationship had reached the point where it was threatening to end Ali's current marriage, clearly, and it was about to become public knowledge. So this is what Belinda recalls. She said, "One night at the Intercontinental Hotel, I caught him coming in late with Veronica. They came in around 1 o'clock and I smacked him good, scratched him a bit. I would have whooped Veronica worse, but she ran. And I didn't know who she was. He kept Veronica a pretty good secret. For a while, I thought it was just a one of a bunch kind of thing." Now, when Ali took Veronica with him to meet the president of the Philippines, he actually began to address her as his wife to the president as well. And a reporter noticed this and he snapped a few pictures and released an article about Ali and his other companion. Of course, Belinda saw the article and she flew straight out to speak to her husband, literally jumped to the plane. Friend and fitness coach Lloyd Wells actually recorded it firsthand. He was a witness to their domestic and he said, "I was in the bedroom. Belinda cussed Ali out, threw furniture around and raised hell for about an hour. And you better believe when she started throwing things, Ali got out of the way. The last thing she said was, 'You tell that bitch, if I see her, I'm going to break her back. If I see her anywhere, I'm going to break her back.' And then she went downstairs, back out in her limousine, rode to the airport and went home. The same plane that brought her to Manila." Well, at that point, people were actually talking more about Belinda against Veronica as much as they were talking about Ali Frazier III, who were now together in Manila. So Frazier had arrived. And Ali thought it'd be funny to label Frazier the gorilla. And this is what he recited. This was his poem. He said, "It will be a killer and a chiller and a thriller when I get the gorilla in Manila."
That poem hurt Frazier, but the champion continued with his racial taunts. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a black rubber gorilla and announced, "This here is Joe Frazier's conscience. I keep it everywhere I go. This is the way he looks when you hit him." At that point, Ali began beating the gorilla. "All night long, this is what you'll see. Come on, gorilla, we're in Manila. Come on, gorilla, this is a thriller." Most of the reporters in attendance found it funny, but not Frazier. He replied, "Look at my beautiful kids. How can I be a gorilla? Well, I guess he's gonna talk. Ain't no way to stop him. But there'll come that moment when he's gonna hear that knock on the door, gonna hear it's time to go to the ring, and then he's gonna remember what it's like to be in with me. How hard and long that night's gonna be." Ali Frazier III took place on October the 1st, 1975, and was billed as the Thrilla in Manila and co-promoted by Don King and Bob Arum. They agreed King would be the main promoter and that Arum would handle the closed circuit side of the fight, mainly because King had fell out with his former friend Hank Schwartz. Arum was also supposed to get a percentage of the gross, plus a guaranteed fee of $300,000. But weeks before the fight, Arum accused King of skimming and scheming by underreporting the gross receipts, and Arum said, "By the end, I let King buy out my interest. I was so disgusted. I was terrified Don was doing things that would get us all arrested." Ferdinand Marcos, the leader of the Philippines of the time, was putting up all the money for the fight, and I was in his country, and Don was fooling around with his money. That's why I pulled back at the end. Don wanted me to sign some documents and I just refused. I was scared.
Well, this is a report, actually, so we're going to read the report. So October the 22nd, it was released, the New York Times. So Muhammad Ali produced a toy pistol tonight after Joe Frazier had accused the world champion of pulling a gun on him. Frazier told a news conference that Ali showed up outside the Challengers Hotel last night and had made crazy remarks and snapped the gun 4 or 5 times up at the balcony where I sat. Frazier evidently believed the champion had aimed a real but unloaded gun at him. He said, "I don't like people playing with guns." Ali laughed when told of Frazier's complaint. The champion said, "That man is so afraid. He didn't know what to do. Why should I try to shoot him? All the money he's making for me? He fell for my little gimmick." Ali said he learned the gun trick from Sonny Liston in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ali said he pulled a fake gun on me and fired blanks, and I was so afraid I jumped on the crab table. So yesterday I said, "Let's go and have some fun. Let's go down to Joe Frazier." And I bought the toy gun and I pointed at him. I said, "I want to shoot you, gorilla." And I pulled the trigger and said, "The gun ain't got no bullets. I want to shoot a gorilla." Well, Frazier said the incident occurred about 3:30 in the morning. And he said, "I threw a pillow out the window. I thought he was tired." So leading up to the fight and shortly before the fight began, Herbert Mohammed actually visited Ali's dressing room and he spoke privately with the champion. And Ali remembered, he said, "He told me success comes from believing in yourself. We prayed to God to give me strength, not for myself, but because there were millions of Muslims all over the world who were praying for me. And if I'd lost, they'd lose too."
Then came the fight. Sports writer Ed Schuler remembered the Thrilla in Manila was the best fight I've ever seen. As it unfolded, everybody at ringside understood they were watching greatness. From the 3rd round on, it just kept building. The ebb and flow was incredible. In the 6th round, Frazier hit Ali with a left hook. That's the hardest punch I've ever seen. It had to be harder than the punch he knocked Ali down with in the first fight. Ali's head turned like it was on a swivel, and his response was to look at Frazier and say, "They told me Joe Frazier was washed up," and Frazier answered, "They lied." The pace never eased. It was hell the whole way. I've never seen two people give more, ever, and I've never seen the film of that fight. I don't have to. I remember it like it was yesterday. Journalist Jerry Eisenberg explained, "What it came down to in Manila wasn't the heavyweight championship of the world. Ali and Frazier were fighting for something more important than that. They were fighting for the championship of each other, and it was an epic battle." The early rounds belonged to Ali. He outfoxed Frazier, landing sharp, clean blows, and staggered the challenger several times. Still, Frazier kept coming forward, and in the middle round the tide turned. Now Ali was tiring, and Frazier rocked him with thunderous blows. After 10 rounds, Frazier appeared to be just ahead. He forced all the action, continually crowding his opponent, and Ali's legs were going, but he was unable to rely on his hand speed and precision to get him through a difficult period. The result was a fight of attrition, with Ali having to confront Frazier's fight toe-to-toe. Ali had to absorb the best of what Frazier had to give.
And then in the 12th, Ali pelted Frazier with short punches, and in the 13th round, his first punch was a sweeping right that sent Frazier's gum shield flying. In the 14th, Ali simply did what was necessary, scoring at will while Frazier was a helpless target. His left eye was completely closed and the vision in his right eye was limited, but he still kept coming forward relentlessly. Frazier made his way to the stall in the 14th round. His trainer, Eddie Futch, recalled, "Joe came back to the corner. He sat down and I said, 'Joe, it's over. I don't want you to go out for the next round.' He started to protest. He was getting up off his stool, so I put my hands on his shoulders and he stayed down. Then I told him, 'Joe, the fight's over. I'm stopping it. You're taking too much punishment and I don't want to see you take any more.'" Interestingly, Walter Youngblood actually remembered Ali being so fatigued that after the 14th round, Ali came back to the corner and told us, "Cut him off." That's how tired he was. He wanted us to cut off his gloves, and Angelo ignored him. He started wiping Ali's face, getting him ready for the 15th round. We sponged him down, and I gave him a drink of sweetened water, honey and water, from a bottle I'd made up. I don't know if he'd gone out for the last round or not. Ali's not a quitter. He'd never quit. But I've never seen him exhausted like that before. Ali would have gone out, but Frazier didn't. And the World Heavyweight Championship was retained. He retained his title by a technical knockout. 3 times Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier fought each other. That's 41 rounds, 2 hours, 3 minutes of war. And Ali won the 3-fight series 2-1.
Asked about a 4th fight, Ali said, "No, I might have a heart attack or something." Now, along with the Rumble, Ali's fights with Frazier are considered by many to be the greatest in boxing history. Ring Magazine called this one 1975's Fight of the Year, the 5th year that an Ali fight had earned that distinction. Many felt that the champ should have retired at this point, but he continued climbing into the ring. By the close of 1975, King tried to muscle in between Ali and Herbert Mohammed with the aim of taking over Ali's career. This move for full control broke King's relationship with Ali and Herbert for the next 5 years. The following year saw Ali in action against 2 largely unknown opponents. First, Belgian stonecutter Jean-Pierre Koopman in Puerto Rico, knocking him out in the 5th round, and then the Englishman Richard Dunn in Munich, Germany, with Ali again winning with a knockout in the 5th. Between these, he faced Jimmy Young in Landover, Maryland, in what most experts regarded as his worst fight. Heavy and out of shape, Ali had obviously refused to take the younger challenger seriously. The decision for Ali was widely booed by the crowd, and many who scored it at ringside thought that Young had outpointed the champion. Even his loyal trainer, Angelo Dundee, acknowledged that Ali's performance had been the worst of his career. Then on October the 1st, 1976, Ali announced his retirement. There was great scepticism. This, remember, was a man who had already made the same announcement 4 times as far back as July 1974 during his training camp for the championship fight against George Foreman. He then said quite categorically, "This is my last fight. I can't be out in the sports world. I've got to get out of the white man's world. I can't have no business with whites. I've got to do my man's work. I've got to be totally spiritual."
Well, just before the retirement announcement, Ali had fought Ken Norton on September the 28th at the Yankee Stadium, New York City, in front of 30,000 fans. Norton led early on, but Ali recovered and won by unanimous decision, though Norton clearly believed he had won the fight. Then in 1977, Ali fought Alfredo Evangelista in Landover, Maryland, which he won by over 15 rounds, and just over 4 months later he took another win for another 15 against the dangerous puncher Ernie Shavers in New York. It was a tough fight for him. So after the Shavers fight, during 1977, Ali travelled over to his second home, which was England, where he popped into a fan's house for a cup of tea and a chat with his granny. So during his visit in South Shields in 1977, Ali accepted an invitation to call in on David Abrahams from Newcastle. Ali showed his common touch by spending his time talking to all his friends and relatives who had packed into his living room to catch a glimpse at the greatest of all time. David's 105-year-old gran, Annie, got into a deep conversation with the champ, and they spoke about politics and religion and breaking down boundaries between black and white. That was said the former local councillor David. That's what he told the paper. So the visit came about because David's dad, Benny Abrahams, a councillor who later became mayor of Newcastle, or Lord Mayor of Newcastle, was one of the party of civic dignitaries who welcomed Ali on his arrival in the northeast. And David said he invited him to the house and Ali accepted. Next thing, Ali turns up at David's house wearing a smart dinner suit, accompanied with his young daughter Hannah, who was only 6 months old. Ali bought his book, The Greatest, My Own Story. Great source for this episode as well. Do read it, good read. And David recalled that, "I'll never forget that he said, 'I've bought a little gift for you,' and asked who we wanted to sign to. And I said to my grandmother, and she was so pleased." David took a photograph of Ali holding Hannah. You can see the photos online, and towering over his tiny little granny.
David also noticed signs of what would later be diagnosed as Parkinson's disease, and he said he looked young and reasonably fit. I remember his hand was shaking when he signed the book, and he couldn't get all his words out, although he knew what he wanted to say. Ali returned to the States for a so-called easy fight against a novice with 7 professional bouts to his credit, the 1976 light heavyweight Olympic gold medalist Leon Spinks. The bout against the young, strong 24-year-old hotshot was scheduled for February the 15th, 1978. The self-proclaimed greatest fighter of all time was taking on a kid who had risen quickly through the ranks to become the #1 challenger. Once again, we do go into a lot of great detail on the build-up to this particular fight on our recent Darker Side of Boxing episode on Leon Spinks, so if you want to hear more on that story, please check out that episode. Well, in short, Spinks proved to be a handful for Ali over 15 rounds in Las Vegas, and he stunned the boxing world and was awarded a split decision victory. At the post-fight press conference, Ali was gracious in defeat and said, "I messed up. I was lousy," the now former champion said, "but I don't want to take anything away from Spinks. He fought a good fight and never quit. He made fools of everybody, even me. We all lose in life." What was the former champion to do? There was only one answer, and that was a rematch. Ali Spinks 2 was scheduled for 15th of September 1978. And this time, the ex-champ would take no chances. Apart from the first ever $1 million live gate for a quarter of a century, the contest would be seen by some 2 billion people in more than 70 countries. Ali surrounded himself with family, friends, and some of the best men in the business, so he could be in the best shape possible.
Well, his routine began at 5 a.m. with Ali ringing the bell outside his private log cabin. His first call was to visit the mosque in the woods, where he meditated on the Quran for half an hour. He would run for 2 miles, then have a massage from Louis Saria, who had been doing the same job for Ali since 1965. Next, under the watchful eye of his conditioner Lloyd Wells, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs American football team, Ali would spend some 45 minutes doing more than 300 sit-ups of various kinds. He said between gulps of air, "People don't see this, they just see me talking. Oh, I'm getting ready. I'll shock the world like I did with Liston." It would, Ali maintained, be his last fight, even if he became the first man to ever win the World Heavyweight Championship 3 different times. It would be one of the biggest sporting achievements the world had ever seen. After the exercises, it would be time for breakfast. His cook, Lana Shabazz, typically served up a platter of fresh fruit, including sliced cantaloupe and fried eggs with sausage and grits. After breakfast, he would rest from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Then it would be time for the gym, often so crowded the body heat from 100 or so onlookers would pump the pressure up past 100 Fahrenheit, 38 centigrades. During training, Ali only had 2 meals a day. In the evening, the menu usually consisted of steak salad and fresh green vegetables. After the workout on the bags and skipping ropes, it would be time for a shower, a rub down, and then the necessary meet and greet. This is every day as well. This is every day. Meet and greet with people. And he would spend literally hours signing autographs and posing for photographs. Ali was more than ready for this fight. More than ready. However, the Leon Spinks that turned up before 70,000 spectators at the Superdome of New Orleans for the rematch, he was an absolute shadow of himself. And literally just nowhere near the level he was at 7 months earlier.
Spinks won 4 or 5 of the rounds, but didn't have anything new to offer. Ali stepped out of the ring by winning a unanimous decision and the first man to regain the heavyweight title on 3 separate occasions, a record that still stands today. Spinks would go on to have an ordinary professional career before retiring in 1994 with a record of 26 wins, 17 losses and 3 draws. After his victory over Spinks, it seemed unlikely that Ali would fight again. Ali himself said as much when he told a reporter, "I'd be the biggest fool in the world to go out a loser after being the first 3-time champ. None of the black athletes before me ever got out when they were on top. My people need one black man to come out on top. I've got to be the first." On June 26, 1979, 9 months after defeating Spinks, Ali put an end to his boxing career and retired from boxing. He was hanging his gloves up for good. He relinquished the title, and that was it. Or at least it should have been. On October 2nd, 1980, Ali came out of retirement for $8 million to fight his ex-sparring partner, the 30-year-old Larry Holmes, who had been champion for 2.5 years and was in his absolute prime. At 39 years of age, over 217 pounds, and stupidly deciding to put his trust into Don King again, Ali was a sitting duck. The only thing going for him was his mystique, but not even that was enough to stop him from taking the beating of his life. After being on the receiving end of 10 painful rounds, Dundee had seen enough and threw in the towel before the bell went for the 11th round in what was one of boxing's saddest night in the sport. Billed as the last hurrah, this was a fight many fans and experts view with complete disapproval.
Yeah, there were many who were uncomfortable after witnessing a declined version of Ali, but others did see the fight as a symbolic passing of the torch from master to pupil. According to Holmes, he had held his punches a little out of sheer respect for his former employer and was reduced to tears after the fight. Shortly after he met with Larry Holmes, it was revealed that before the fight, Muhammad Ali had had an examination at the Mayo Clinic and the results were quite shocking. The examination came after Ali had complained of tingling in his hands and slurring of his speech. The exam showed that he actually had a hole in his membrane of his brain. However, promoter Don King withheld his report and allowed the fight to go on. Other parts of the report explained he, as in Ali, does not quite hop with the agility that one might anticipate. And on finger-to-the-nose testing, there is a slight degree of missing the target. And he said some difficulty with memory. Interviewed by Tom Hauser 9 years after the fight, screenwriter John Shulian didn't hold back on his assessment of Dodgy Don King. "I hated Don King for promoting that fight. That lying, thieving motherfucker. That he could stand there and say, 'Oh, Muhammad, I love you. I'm with you, Muhammad. You're the greatest. And you make a fortune off Ali getting brutalised that way. Well, fuck you, Don King. The man is a total scumbag. They sacrificed Ali. That's what it was, a human sacrifice for money and power. That night went far beyond Ali. One of the great symbols of our time was tarnished. So many people, black, whites, Muslims, Americans, Africans, Asians, people all over the world believed in Ali. And he was destroyed because of people who didn't care one bit about the things he had stood for his entire life."
Just 3 months later, on Monday, January 19th, 1981, a Los Angeles Times photographer, Boris Yarrow, heard reports of a suicidal jumper on the radio. He drove to Los Angeles' Miracle Mile, where he found a young black man in flared jeans and a hoodie perched on an office building fire escape 9 floors above. Joe, as he was named in reports, had been up there for hours. According to a police spokesman, he seemed to think he was in Vietnam with the Viet Cong coming at him. A crowd gathered on the street below, goading Joe to jump to his death. Police officers, a psychologist, and a priest leaned out of a nearby window, imploring him to come inside. He shouted while dangling his feet over the side whenever someone got too close. "I'm no good. I'm going to jump." Ali's best friend, Howard Bingham, was at the scene, and he called Ali, who lived nearby. Bingham later told reporters, about 4 minutes later, Ali comes driving up the wrong side of the street in his Rolls Royce with his lights blinking. Yarrow watched Ali run into the building and took photographs of what happened next. One captures the fighter in a dark suit and tie, his smooth face expressionless, leaning out of a window, peering almost casually around a pillar to get a look at Joe. Yards away, Joe is balanced on the ledge, one foot in front of the other, gripping a pillar as he leans out over empty space. In trying to get a better look at Ali, Joe's at risk of falling to his death. By the Los Angeles Times account, Ali leaned out and shouted to Joe, "You're my brother, I love you, and I couldn't lie to you." Soon, he made his way to the fire escape, put an arm around Joe, and guided him inside.
Well, the two of them walked out of the building together, got in Ali's car and drove, after a stop at a police station, to a nearby hospital. The alleged story wasn't quite as simple as it appeared. The police actually reported that Joe was badly disturbed, and later in the week the Los Angeles Times published a follow-up. Joe, it turned out, was only 21, too young to have served in Vietnam, but still he was unwell. On Wednesday, January the 21st, at a news conference for a beverage company, Ali announced that he was going to buy Joe's clothes and travel with him. He was going to buy some clothes, going to travel with him to his home state in Michigan, though it's unclear if they ever made that trip. Robert Lipstahl, a former Times reporter who has spent much of his life reporting on Ali, said he was still the most beautiful creature on the planet. Lipstahl added that in some sort of ways he talked a lot of people off the ledge. "I think about a guy who made people brave. That's what he did." So given the regulations regarding his state of health, any thought of stepping into the ring again was viewed by many as pure stupidity. Few athletes suffer the pain like a prize fighter, but then someone mentions money, health issues become insignificant. Lots of money makes the pain bearable, and Ali loved the celebrity lifestyle, and he also loved the money. It seemed inconceivable that he would even be granted a boxing license to fight again, but on December the 11th, 1981, he unfortunately did. Despite his increasingly suspect medical condition, Ali took his last purse and climbed into the ring with rising heavyweight contender Trevor Berbick. Because Ali was now seen as a damaged fighter, and few US fans expressed much interest in watching him anymore, the fight took place in relative obscurity in Nassau, and it was billed as the drama in Bahama.
For years, Ali had relied on his extraordinary reflexes and reach to keep him away from his opponents. He also punched to the head much more than most boxers did. It was a high-risk strategy, since over the duration of a long fight, punches to the body can actually be much more effective in slowing down an opponent. Now, although he held his own for 8 rounds, Ali was a helpless spectator in round 9 and 10. It seemed like there was a ghost of the former champ who knew exactly what to do, but his mind and body simply couldn't do it fast enough. 10 years earlier, Ali would have smashed Berbick. Even 5 years earlier, he would have got a decision. But here and now, he was beaten by unanimous decision over 10 excruciating rounds, where he lost, not to Berbick, but to Father Time. And speaking to the press, Ali at last accepted the inevitable by saying, "Father Time caught up with me. I'm finished. I've got to face facts. For the first time, I feel that I'm 40 years old. I know it's the end. I'm not crazy. After Holmes, I had excuses. I was too light, didn't breathe right. No excuses this time, but at least I didn't go down. No pictures of me on the floor, no pictures of me falling through the ropes, no broken teeth, no blood. I'm happy, I'm still pretty. I came out all right for an old man. We all lose sometimes. We all grow old. Following his loss, Ali retired permanently in 1981, and the most exciting and one of the greatest careers in ring history at long last had come to an end. His career record stood at 56 wins, 37 by knockout against 5 losses. Meanwhile, concern over Ali's health was mounting. His motor functions began to slow and decline, and in September of 1984, he checked into the Columbian Presbyterian Medical Center in New York for a series of diagnostic tests.
After his tests, Ali told reporters that, "I'm not suffering. I'm in no pain. It's really nothing I can't live with. But I go to bed and sleep 10 hours, and 2 hours after I get up, I'm tired and drowsy again. Sometimes I have trembling in my hands. My speech is slurred. People say to me, 'What did you say? I can't understand you.' I'm not scared, but my family and friends are scared to death." After the tests, a supervising physician reported that Muhammad Ali does not have Parkinson's disease, believe it or not, but had some mild symptoms of Parkinson's syndrome. After seeing several other doctors in 1984, Muhammad Ali was officially diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome. Although Parkinson's is not a disease confined to those who have spent their careers in the boxing ring, Ali's case was noted to have been likely brought on by repeated head trauma from his career as a boxer. The ensuing years were difficult for Ali. The profession by which he had defined himself was gone. His health continued to deteriorate, and his marriage was about to fail. Not long after Ali and Veronica decided to get divorced, the focus shifted to money, and Gene Dibble, who was an investment advisor to Ali, explained the outcome of their divorce in 1986. The result was Ali ordered his attorneys to disregard the prenuptial agreement, and Veronica got an extraordinarily generous settlement. She got the house and everything in it, which included $500,000 worth of rugs, paintings, and things like that. The trust fund that he had was divided 50-50, although the money she got wasn't tied specifically to Hannah and Layla. So you can make your own guess as to what happened to it. And there were other twists, like Ali paying certain taxes. So by the time they were done, despite the prenuptial agreement, Veronica walked away with more money than Muhammad Ali.
To conclude Ali's marriages, his third wife, Veronica, they wed in 1977, the same year he got divorced to Belinda, and their relationship became strained, and after having 2 children together, as we mentioned, Hannah and Layla, they divorced in 86. Then on November 19th, 1986, Ali married a 4th time to Yolanda Lonnie Williams, and together they adopted a son, Asad Amin. Ali knew Lonnie since her family moved across the street from the Clay family when she was 6 years old. He was 44 and she was 29 when they married. When asked if he had any regrets about his life, Ali replied, "My children. I never got to raise them because I was always boxing and because of divorce." On March the 31st, 1985, Ali was the special guest referee for the main event of the inaugural WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden in New York. The tagline was "the greatest wrestling event of all time." The main event was a tag team match between Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, who defeated Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper by pinfall. In July 1987, Ali then appeared at the World Boxing Council convention in Mexico City, where he was introduced to a Mexican surgeon who offered his services for an operation to transplant tissue from Ali's adrenal gland to his brain. Ali's family and Dennis Cope, his supervising physician from the UCLA Medical Center, strongly opposed the procedure, which was experimental and had a 10% mortality rate. Thankfully, it was never performed. Then Dr. Raiko Medencia told Ali that the cause of his slurred speech and slowed movement wasn't brain damage. Rather, according to Medencia, Ali's symptoms were the result of an extraordinary high level of pesticides in his blood. Ali decided to go ahead with the treatment at the Hilton Head Hospital in South Carolina.
The procedure used was to remove blood filtered through a machine to eliminate toxins and return to his body in a purified state. Dennis Cope concluded that the tests were run on September 40th, 1988 and sent to Smith Clean Bioscience Laboratory, which can detect 1 part per million, so it's a thorough test. No chlorinated pesticides were detected. There was no evidence of them whatsoever. Waste of time, but you can understand why they want to do it. That same year, Bundini Brown passed away after he suffered a stroke and was found by a maid in a motel room. Lonnie Ali recalled, "I knew he was upset because for a month or two afterwards, I'd catch him looking into space. He and Bundini spent a lot of time together, and Mohammed had never had anybody that close to him die." A year later, in June 1989, Mark Cram wrote an interesting article. He called it "Great Men Die Twice." And this is how it read: "The public prefers, indeed seems to insist on, the president set by Rocky Marciano, who quit undefeated, kept self-delusion at bay. Ali knew the importance of a clean farewell, not only as a health measure, but as good commercial sense. His ring classicism had always argued so persuasively against excessive physical harm. His pride was beyond anything but a regal exit. But his prolonged decline had been nasty, unseemly. So who or what pressured him to continue? Some blamed his manager, Herbert Mohammed, who had earned millions with Ali. Herbert said that his influence wasn't that strong. 2 years after that last fight, Ali seemed as mystified as everyone else as to why he hadn't ended his career earlier. He was living with his third wife, the goddess Veronica, or the ice goddess Veronica, in an LA mansion surrounded by gifts of a lifetime, a 6-foot hand-carved tiger given to him by Teng Xiaoping and a robe given to him by Elvis Presley.
Mark Cram finished his article and said, fatigued, his hands tremoring badly, he sat in front of the fire and could only say, "Everybody got lost in life. I just got lost. That's all." On the subject of loss, Ali's father, Cassius Clay Sr, passed away in February 1990. That same year, Ali travelled to Iraq prior to the Gulf War and met with Saddam Hussein in an attempt to negotiate the release of American hostages. Ali secured the release of the hostages in exchange for promising Hussein that he would bring America an honest account of Iraq. Despite arranging the hostages' release, he received criticism from President George H.W. Bush and Joseph C. Wilson, the highest-ranking American diplomat in Baghdad. His mother, Odessa Clay, passed away 4 years later, in August 1994. Several of his fights were watched by an estimated 1 to 2 billion viewers between 1974 and 1980. Then on July 22nd, 1996, in front of a worldwide audience of over 3 billion, including television viewers, Ali opened the Atlanta Olympic Games. America chose this moment to honour him by asking if he would light the ceremonial flame. He accepted the challenge without hesitation. His reduced motor skills did not stop him, and he did not back down from the responsibility of facing a worldwide audience of billions. Outfitted in a white tracksuit that eerily made him seem to glisten against a dark night sky, he approached the unlit saucer with his flaming Olympic torch, his free arm trembling visibly from the effects of Parkinson's. Ali admitted the day after, "It wouldn't catch. Then I puffed on it, and the thing caught fire." Before Ali left the stadium, President Bill Clinton asked to see him. The president stood directly in front of Ali and put his hands on his shoulders and said, "They didn't tell me who would light the flame, but when I saw it was you, I cried."
Very emotional scene, actually. I remember watching it at the time. It was Yeah, it's so sad. But at the same Olympics, Ali was also presented with a replacement gold medal after throwing the original into the bottom of the Ohio River, as we said in part one. It can be said that this one moment captured the image of Muhammad Ali's Olympic youth and summarized the enduring spirit and courage of the man he became. After the September the 11th attacks in 2001, Ali actually stated that Islam is a religion of peace and does not promote terrorism or killing people. He also said that he was angry that the world sees a certain group of Islam followers who caused this destruction, that they are not real Muslims. They are racist fanatics who call themselves Muslims. In autumn of 2005, the $60 million Muhammad Ali Center opened in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. In addition to displaying his boxing memorabilia, the center focused on core themes of peace, social responsibility, respect, and personal growth. Outside of fights, Ali made many television appearances, including The Parkinson Show, on a number of occasions, where they were unforgettable interviews he gave to the BBC talk show and were landmarks in the rise and ultimately fall of his career. Ali made his 1971 debut on Michael Parkinson's BBC TV programme in 1971 and was considered the greatest chat show guest on British television ever. The host echoed his verdict of its viewers in his memoirs, although he also noted that the boxer's second and third appearances in 1974 and 1981 showed Ali as first a more complex and then ultimately a tragic figure. Michael Parkinson said, "What a figure, what a personality. I've seen some beautiful men in my time, but he was gorgeous, beautiful, but the gibberish he talked was just extraordinary." After a difficult second interview when Ali was angry at the time and surrounded by an unhappy entourage, the third interview was much more difficult.
Michael recalled, "It was a different kind of interview. He didn't try to insult me. I didn't try to provoke him too much. I just tried to find out what was wrong. What was wrong was simply the fact that it was the beginning of his illness that killed him in the end. That was the saddest thing of all. There are certain people who you can't imagine dying, and he was one." On a more funnier side, while Ali was in London, he went on the football show The Big Match on ITV and said this great quote, "Anyway, I heard all the way in America, heard all the way in Indonesia, that this fella talks too much. They say he's another Muhammad Ali. There's just one Muhammad Ali, and I want you to know, whoever you are, you're not a fighter, and you don't take my job. I'm the talker. Now, Clough, I've had enough. Stop it." Now, of course, he was referring to the legendary Brian Clough. Clough's response, when asked if he was going to stop it, he said, grinning, "No, I want to fight him." When they finally met, it was nothing but respect. Ali's Parkinson's syndrome led to a gradual decline in his health, but he managed to fight on until he was hospitalized in Scottsdale, Arizona on June the 2nd, 2016, with a respiratory illness. Though his condition was initially described as fair, it worsened, and he died the following day at the age of 74 from septic shock. Not only did we lose a legend of boxing, but a legend of sport and humanity. Muhammad Ali's funeral was pre-planned by himself and others for several years prior to his actual death. The service began in Louisville on June 9, 2016. With an Islamic Janazah prayer service at the Freedom Hall on the grounds of the Kentucky Exposition Center. The Janazah prayer was attended by the Turkish president.
Then on June 10, 2016, the funeral parade passed through the streets of Louisville, ending at Cave Hill Cemetery, where his body was buried during a private ceremony. A public memorial service for Ali at downtown Louisville KFC Yum Center was held during the afternoon on June 10th. Billy Crystal gave an eulogy. The pallbearers included Will Smith, Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson, with honorary pallbearers including George Chuvalo, Larry Holmes and George Foreman. Ali's memorial was watched by an estimated 1 billion viewers worldwide. There was a tribute by Bob Dylan, and he said, "If the measure of greatness is to gladden the heart of every human being on the face of the earth, then he truly was the greatest. In every way, he was the bravest, the kindest, and the most excellent of men." So that is the full story of Muhammad Ali. But we want to finish with, not with the sad death of Muhammad Ali, because Ali's spirit and legacy will live on forever. So we are now going to finish off with some quotes from the man himself and others that were around him. And we're going to start with Ali on hating, because it was one thing he will always mention, the hate on his other fighters. So he said, "I never hated anyone, I fought. And some of the guys, Jimmy Ellis, Buster Mathis, Zora Foley, I liked a lot. It's wrong to hate. Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier, George Foreman. We were all in it together. It was good, and we had our day." Now, some of the guys around him. So Eddie Futch wasn't necessarily around him, but he was around at the time, on ranking Ali. He said, "I'd rank Ali with Joe Louis and Jack Johnson as the 3 greatest heavyweights of all time." Jim Jacobs, he said, "If you made Sugar Ray Robinson a 200-pound fighter with no loss of speed and coordination, I still think Ali in his prime would have beaten him." Journalist Mike Katz gives his opinion by using an interesting suggestion, and he says, "If fighters could fight like baseball teams and play 162-game schedule, if you could match the greatest heavyweights of all time at their peak."
So Ali was in a league with Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, Jack Dempsey, Rocky Marciano, Gene Tunney, Larry Holmes, and Sonny Liston. You know who the best heavyweights are. You can put them all on the list. Ali wouldn't be undefeated. There are guys who would give him trouble on any given night, but I think when the season was over, Ali would be in first place. Angelo Dundee said this on his fighter's career: "Ali before the layoff was a better fighter than Ali after. But what a lot of people don't realise, and it's very sad, is we never saw him at his peak. The Ali who fought Cleveland Williams and Zora Foley was the best he could be at that time, but he was still improving. He hadn't lost any of his speed, but he was getting bigger and stronger and more experienced in the ring." What was he, 25 years old when they made him stop? Those next 3 years would have been his peak, and if it continued getting better at that rate he was going, God only knows how great he would have been. Cus D'Amato once said, "There were 2 Alis. Before the layoff, the only time anyone could touch him was at the start of a fight when the referee instructed both men to touch gloves. I don't care how many fights he won after the layoff, the young Ali was the real Ali." On that thought, Ali once said this on a fight between the 2 versions of himself. He said, "If you put Muhammad Ali who fought Cleveland Williams and Zora Foley against the Muhammad Ali who fought Joe Frazier and George Foreman, the young Ali would win. I was more experienced when I was older. I was stronger. I had more belief in myself."
And he continued, he said, "Except for Sonny Liston, the men I fought when I was younger weren't near the fighters that Joe Frazier and George Foreman were. Williams and Foley were light work, but I had my speed when I was young. I was faster on my legs and my hands were faster. The young Ali would dance, move, get in and out. He'd beat the older Ali all around the ring. The older Ali wouldn't quit. When I was old, against the young version of me, I'd use the rope-a-dope, make charges and try and knock him out. But I was better when I was younger." Ali ended the book with Thomas Hauser saying a brilliant quote. He said, "I'm still going to find out who stole my bike when I was 12 years old in Louisville, and I'm still going to whoop him. That was a good bike." So we're now finally coming to the end of this show, and we're going to just finish it off with one of our favourite Muhammad Ali poems and one of our best and last quotes. It's just a great quote from him. So the poem is, "This is the legend of Muhammad Ali, the greatest fighter that ever will be. He talks a great deal and brags indeed of a powerful punch and blinding speed. Ali fights great. He's got speed and endurance. If you decide to fight him, increase your insurance. Ali's got a left, Ali's got a right. If he hits you once, you're asleep for the night. And then the last quote from the great man, he says, when will they ever have another fighter who writes poems, predicts rounds, beats everybody, makes people laugh, makes people cry, and is as tall and as extra pretty as me? In the history of the world, from the beginning of time, there's never been another fighter like me.
Absolutely no. Nobody has ever come close to touching the great Muhammad Ali. And that does conclude our story, our definitive two-parter on the career of Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, the greatest, whatever moniker you want to use. As I said at the very start of the first episode, he's been an absolute wonderful ride to cover the Muhammad Ali career profile. And I hope you guys have really enjoyed it. And what I will say is there are stories throughout this that we've never told before. There are stories that we've purposely all missed because they are in other episodes. Hence why we have directed you to other episode. So if this is the first time you are listening to anything we have done on Muhammad Ali, please do go and look back at the legendary nights, the tales that we've done, like with Joe Frazier, with George Foreman. Please go back and listen to those episodes. There was Sonny Liston. There's so many different episodes that Ali features in. The career profile of Joe Frazier, the career profile of George Foreman. There are so many different episodes which Ali features in, and stories about Ali features in. So if you haven't already heard any of them, please do go back and listen to them. They are all on the feed. But if you are a long-time listener, you will have heard all the different variety of stories, and we'd like to think that this episode now completely concludes the work that we've done on the career and the life and the times of the great Muhammad Ali. It's been an absolutely, thoroughly enjoyable ride to cover his career, and I truly hope we have done this career profile justice. We said from the start, Johnston, that we wanted to redo this particular career profile because of the way we do our storytelling-based podcast now compared to what we did back when we first started it. And I do truly feel, after recording this episode, that we really have done it justice across everything that we've done on him, all the different stories, all the different moments, the good, the bad, and even the ugly moments throughout the life and times of Muhammad Ali. I really do feel that we've covered it all, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it.
I think we have. I mean, look, there are so many, there's so much more to the guy that, you know, like you say, Sean, we didn't deliberately put into this episode because of the fact that we didn't want to go over old ground and repeat ourselves, especially if you've listened to those legendary nights. You want to hear something completely different, and I feel that we've done that. I think the one thing we tried to present to you guys was a lot of stuff from himself, which is something we haven't really done. We tend to have a lot of opinions from other people on the great man and people that work with him and around him, and we have our own opinions on him. So it was nice to be able to incorporate a lot of his own stuff, his own thoughts, the reasons why he made the choices he made. And I think it creates a bit of a deep personality into what Muhammad Ali was as a person and what he became. There's not much you can really say. The only thing we ever used to knock him for was how he treated Joe Frazier. We didn't enjoy it. We didn't like it. Well, it was the time people enjoyed it. It was funny. He was promoting a fight. That's the way you see it. And then when you look back on it, it was just too harsh. It really grinded Frazier down. And we're fans of Frazier. I think that's why sticking that hate thing, the hate quote at the end. He didn't hate anyone. It was just to promote fights. He did take things over the line sometimes. But the general consensus when you think of Muhammad Ali is literally just a nice guy. A guy that had times in his life where he had to make decisions at a very young age, and he made them. And lost the peak years of his career, Sean. The question what I'm going to ask you, Sean, I'm going to throw this back at you, those quotes as well. The young Ali, the older Ali, and that 3 year in exile. I mean, could you have imagined what more could this man have? What more could he have done? He's my. I mean, him and Sugar Ray Robinson are side by side. I change my mind how it goes. Sometimes I have Sugar Ray as the greatest ever, and sometimes it'd be Ali. At this moment in time, it's Ali. Yeah, I mean, those 3 years, Sean. I mean, who would have? There isn't anyone. Would Frazier? My question is, I put it this way: would Frazier have ever gone on? Would anyone have gone on to take those titles from Muhammad Ali if he weren't in exile?
We're just never going to know the answer to that question. We're never going to know
I know.
how
But
good.
think about it. I know what you mean, but do you want to? I can't think anyone would have beaten him, Sean, honestly. I don't think anyone would have beaten him. I think maybe Frazier, maybe Foreman, possibly. Honestly, at that time, he was just too good.
They were the two fighters that would have had the best chance of beating him. I think that's kind of widely regarded by many in boxing. They were the two that came out of that period of time that were the shining lights of the time. Frazier and then Foreman, both in their respective rights, did what they needed to do while Ali was making his return from exile. And we can never really understand and appreciate what we could have seen out of Muhammad Ali's career should he have not been in exile. But I suppose if he wouldn't have been in exile and he wouldn't have returned the way he did and he wouldn't have gone on to have those fights, would his career have panned out the way it did? I mean, it's like a story. I mean, people believe in things. People believe things do happen for certain reasons. People believe in fate. People have their own beliefs in life and the way things do work and the way things are panned out for people. And I think, like, would it have been the same for him? Would things have been the same? Would he have been as dominant? Would have someone inflicted that defeat? We're just never going to know the answers to it. The one thing we do know the answers to, though, is that he is arguably, and in many people's eyes, the greatest fighter of all time. And you can argue about this debate. This debate is certainly something many people will have had over the years. Is he the greatest fighter of all time? Some people don't think he is. Some people think he is. One thing I will say is that he changed the face of boxing. He changed the way boxing was promoted. He changed the way people sold fights. How many fighters, even 50, 60 years down the line, look at Muhammad Ali's blueprint and try to replicate certain elements of it, whether it be fighting style, whether it be trash talking, whether it just being an almighty decent human being, being an activist, being a civil rights speaker, all the stuff that he did, it went beyond boxing. It transcended him as a human being. And I think without the character that he was, he would have just been another boxer that achieved something in the sport. He wouldn't have gone beyond that. And I think that's the thing we need to take away from this as a fan and as a human being. You've got to look at it and go, well, look what else he did. He made decisions. He made very tough decisions in life about certain moments, about changing his name, adopting a new religion from what he was brought up on, going against the grain in a time where segregation and racism was even worse than what it is today. And he was able to come out of that, the other side, and leave this sport and leave this world with this legendary status. And you think of boxing and you think of certain names that are synonymous with it. And anybody that's not a boxing fan, if you uttered the words Muhammad Ali to them, they will know who he is. And that, for me, is how much he transcended the sport of boxing.
Absolutely. And you know what as well is you saying that about when you think of boxing, what's the first name that comes into your mind? My boy is turning 6 and the only boxer he knows is Muhammad Ali. I know that's because of me. But I don't, he's not interested in boxing or something, to be fair. I mean, why would he be? I'm certainly not sending him there, but that would be the name, and probably the reason why is because there's a great big picture of him hanging up on my wall here. But that's going to continue through the times. He will then tell whether he's into boxing or not, he will know who he is, and then he'll tell his children. That is he's just an ever burning light. Sad. Hope you listeners enjoyed the way we presented it. And yes, we did send you down different avenues, but the reason why is because what we could have done, what we were debating doing, was just pulling out like the best stories within each legendary night. So I suppose the best thing for us to do is send you down those avenues and listen to those great legendary nights. Even the dark side of boxing, he features in that with Chuck Wepner. He features in Leon Spinks's as well. Oscar Bonavena. I mean, Ali's presented in so many different episodes because he touched so many different people. He fought some of the best fighters around. But what a legend, Sean. I mean, it was great finishing off we could have finished it off with his fight career, but we thought we'd added in the bits at the end. Saving someone who's about to commit suicide. I mean, what a story that was. I didn't even know about that until you mentioned that when we done our first ever career profile, which was on Ali, Sean, and it was great listening and reading to that because it just shows you the type of guy he was. It really does. A genuinely nice guy. I just don't think there's anyone. There's loads of people out there like it, but there's not many people that have a bad word to say against him. The only person I ever see a bad word against Ali was Frazier because of the shit he sort of got from him. Just, I hope you enjoyed it, and it was great to be watching, reading, and writing, and having to edit stuff and record stuff on Muhammad Ali. It was special.
It's been a special pleasure to sit down and reboot the Muhammad Ali story and give you one more definitive episode on him. And if you've enjoyed it, please always let us know with the episodes. Even if you didn't enjoy it, please let us know. And you can find us on Twitter at career_profiles. That's our Twitter handle for the Career Profiles podcast. Or it's at BTR Boxing Pod, where you could find the main hub of the source of all our episodes across the whole network. If you've not followed us on Facebook or on Instagram or on YouTube or on TikTok, we're on there, BTR Boxing Podcast Network. Please just go and give us a follow, a like and a share to everything that you see. It's always truly appreciated. And we've got to give a huge shout out to the patrons of the podcast that subscribe to us separately and become members separately to just listen to the general episodes. And by doing that, they'll have had early access to this episode. They'll have had ad-free versions of this episode and been able to listen to it all in its entirety. And they'll also get all the extra Patreon-only content as well. So if you're interested in becoming a patron, please check us out at patreon.com/BTR Boxing Podcast. That is it for the career profile of Muhammad Ali. We truly hope you've enjoyed part 2 and the whole overall presentation of the career profile of Muhammad Ali.